All right, for the very latest on this, we're now being joined from Oslo by Dr. Glenn Diesen, Professor of International Relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. Glenn Diesen, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the show. Let me begin by asking you how you read the current statements, the latest statements by President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Well, I think he needs definitely more weapons. A key problem which is recognized among the Ukrainians, the West and Russia is that this Kursk invasion does not seem to be sustainable. That is, the Ukrainians went out from their defensive positions, out in the open inside Russian territory. So as a predictable consequence, they're losing a lot of mechanized vehicles and manpower, which is not very good in a war of attrition in which you're attempting to exhaust the adversary. So in contrast, on the Russian side, within their own territory, they seem to have better air defenses. Also, this allows them to use their very powerful glide bombs. So I know that in the Western media, at least, there's a lot of excitement about Ukraine taking territory within Russia. But when the army is knocked out as a consequence, then they will eventually lose the territory they took. So this is why it's not sustainable. And this is also why Ukraine is now asking for more weapons. And as you see in countries like the UK or Germany, they're also using this invasion to whip up excitement and advocate for more weapons to assist in the invasion. So I think this is where we are at the moment, because the Ukrainians are suffering greatly as a result of this. And this is also something that Ukrainian military commanders across the country are asking, why all these weapons were sent into Russia and being destroyed when they're struggling so much on the other front lines where the Russians are making gains. Yeah. So it's so there's a lot at stake.
Yeah. That's an important point you're making, that they went into this and a lot of people thought that this was going to be a successful incursion and they will gain ground, but it seems like a miscalculation in some ways. How do you see the Russians' continuous attack on Ukrainian regions in the Donbas region, something which Kyiv thought would ease up after their attacks in Kursk?
Yeah, and I think that was one of the objectives of going into Kursk, to divert Russian troops from the front line in Donbas. But instead, we see that the Russians are making more progress now, simply because the Ukrainians diverted all these troops into Kursk. So it's going across the main front line. The most critical area, I think, is Pokrovsk, because, again, this is a war of attrition, but Pokrovsk is a key logistics center point, is a transportation hub. All areas connect through this. So if the Russians are able to take this, there's not many more defensive lines west of Pokrovsk, and also they will be able to disrupt the Ukrainian logistics and also use this as a bridgehead to expand further. So we're already seeing huge encirclements taking place. A lot of Ukrainians are fleeing, and when they're fleeing, they're losing a lot of equipment and men as well. So I think this is what the Russians are doing. They want to take advantage of what they see on the Ukrainian side being a misstep or a strategic mistake. Doesn't mean they're not gaining something from Kursk. It just means this results in weaknesses other places. So the Russians will try to take advantage of this. Meanwhile, they're building up their defenses in Kursk and also beginning to knock out as much as they can from the Ukrainians, and then eventually begin to push them back. But as you mentioned in your opening, there are a lot of risks to the Russians as well. A lot of Russian troops could get stuck on the south side of the Seym River as the Ukrainians are knocking out the bridges, and they could be enveloped in a cauldron there.
Right. And as you are telling us about how this is unfolding for the Ukrainian side, obviously the West can't afford for Ukraine to lose this war. So many of the countries are agreeing to give some of the weapons. But why do you think the US is still not allowing Kyiv to use its long-range Storm Shadow missiles on Russian territory, despite, of course, multiple pleas from Ukraine? That would be a dangerous escalation, I assume.
Yeah, it is a very dangerous escalation because the reason why it's a controversial topic is because the ambiguity over whether or not it's a defensive or offensive war by NATO. It's very popular in the West to say that Ukraine was attacked and NATO has every right to assist Ukraine with the right to defend itself. But it's important to keep in mind that this has to a large extent been a proxy war against Russia for a decade now. Keep in mind that after the West toppled the government in Ukraine in 2014, on the first day, the US began, or the CIA began, a covert war against Russia. This was before there was ever any conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And also, we also learned that when Russia eventually invaded in 2022, the reason why the US and UK sabotaged the peace agreements in Istanbul, and this according to the mediators, was because the US saw an opportunity to use the Ukrainians to kill Russians. Now, it's also been confirmed in Bloomberg that once the Russians invaded, the US and UK, their top officials considered the only acceptable outcome of the war to be the military defeat of Russia and regime change. And then we also had the issues like the US Helsinki Commission arguing peace can only be restored by decolonizing Russia, which means to break it into pieces and balkanize it. So the point is the context here. Now that NATO is launching missiles into Russian territory, or at least NATO missiles are being used, and NATO is very enthusiastically backing the invasion of Russian territory, this obviously is an escalation. And if we see this in the context that NATO effectively has gone to war against Russia, the world's largest nuclear power, it makes a lot of sense if the Americans are a bit cautious and attempt to pull back on the leash, especially on the British, who are a bit too enthusiastic about this.
Yeah.
And the US is also trying to take some distance and likely ask itself as well, how much success do they actually want in terms of invading Russia, humiliating its political leaders, because at some point the Russian response will come.
Yeah, and certainly the Americans can't afford two full-blown wars, one of course happening in West Asia and one here. Glenn Deason, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.